Inner child work is really, really valuable, but it is also very time consuming and pretty slow in healing. And the reason for this is that most people don't realize we don't have just one inner child, we have many, many more. And on top of this, not all of them are children, quite a number of them are adults, and some aren't even human. Quite a bit of the inner children present themselves as evil, as demonic, and that's where we get this feeling of inner demons from. So when we think there is something evil inside of us, that we have a demon, it's actually just one of our inner children that is carrying a lot of pain, a lot of anger, a lot of trauma. And because it carries this anger, it presents itself as an angry, evil thing. But in reality, it is just a piece of us, it is just a part of our soul that got lost inside of us. So really, there's nothing to be afraid of, and there is really a perfectly good way of healing this poor inner child that carries so much pain. This video will teach you how to connect to your inner children, your inner demons, your inner beings, however you want to call them, so that you can really heal them, that you can release them from this trauma, and that you can feel like a totally different person. The method that I'm going to present here, that I call Inner Child Work 2.0 or the Inner Beings method, is pretty simple, fast, and efficient. It's really a very fast way of healing trauma. There are 3 steps to it. First, you identify the inner being that you want to work with. Then you gain their trust. And thirdly, you help them release the pain that they're carrying. And that's all there's to it. Poof, the inner being is released, and you will feel the effect physically and emotionally of this trauma being lifted out of your system. So let's move on to the first step. You identify the inner being that you want to work with. As I said, there are many, but using your focus and your intention, you can really select the one that you're working with right now. And there are different ways to do this. A first way, which is really good when you're just getting started, is you ask an inner being to come to you. So you just ask which one of you wants to be healed, which one wants to work with me, and you wait and see which one comes. And this is so good at first because this is a being that wants to connect, that is open to connecting with you, that wants to heal. So you won't get that much resistance from it. So that's the first way. Another way is you use your intuition or your higher self or the universe or however you want to call it, and you ask your intuition, universe, to guide you towards the inner being that needs healing right now. So the top priority, so to speak. So you just go into a meditative state, you relax the body, relax the mind, you go inside and you ask, connect to your higher intuition, and you ask, guide me towards the inner being that needs healing the most right now. And you just wait and see which inner being appears. And I have to mention here, there are people that can really, see things, hear things internally really well, that have this gift. Unfortunately, not all of us have this. I don't have it. So when I talk about seeing the inner beings, I don't see them really clearly. I don't hear them. I don't hear a peep. Some really, really hear their voices. It's so cool. So I don't hear them. I see them vaguely, but it's mainly in my imagination. Because the imagination, you might already know this or you might not, the imagination is real. It is your visions. So working with your imagination, getting used to it, getting used to seeing this as vision is really, really powerful for all the inner work that you're doing, but especially for this method. And I made a separate video on how to use the active imagination, as it's called. So how you can see using your imagination if you cannot really clearly see visions. So check that one out. I'll put it in the description, but listen to this one first and then go to that one afterwards. So you see this being in your imagination, and really the first hint that comes to you, you think maybe it's a boy, I see a vague boy, then that's it, that's the vision, that's the inner being. There's no point in doubting it. Maybe you are wrong, maybe it is a girl, but it doesn't matter. Just go for it and start trusting your intuition, your imagination, your inner knowing. And the more you practice, the more you start trusting it, the more clear it will become. So at first, don't worry too much about seeing only vague things, not being sure if the inner being is there. If you go with your intention towards an inner being, then it is there, no matter how vague it seems to you. So I've talked about two ways of approaching an inner being. Either you ask one to come to you, or you ask your intuition to guide you towards the inner being that needs healing. There's also a third way. If you have something that you want to release, for example, you have anger towards someone and you want to release this anger because you know that forgiveness is the way of healing, but it's not so simple. Maybe consciously, I want to forgive this person. I understand the situation. I know they acted from their own trauma, but still, I'm still angry. And this is because no matter how rational you approach the situation, this inner being that is carrying that pain is still angry. And so the third way of identifying an inner being is focused on a thing you want to release. For example, you want to release anger towards somebody. You go inside into a meditative state and you ask the inner being that is carrying this anger to come to you, or you ask to be guided towards this specific inner being. And you can do this with things that you want to release emotionally, but also physically. For example, if your shoulder is aching and it's not because of a fall or something, it's something chronic, then this means there is an inner being connected to that pain. There is a past trauma, a past whatever that is still hurting you emotionally and physically, because the inner beings have a lot of influence on our physical body. So again, you focus on, I want to connect with the inner being that is causing this pain, and then you ask your intuition or your guidance to go to that specific inner being. So that was the first step. We have identified the inner being that we want to work with. We have approached it. It is here, however vague it is. There is some idea of an inner being. Really doesn't matter if you cannot see it. It is there. Trust the process. And then we move on to the second step, which is gaining their trust. You have to understand this inner being was created when you experienced the pain, the trauma. So this is probably a lot of years ago, maybe it's 20 years ago, 30 years ago, no matter how long. But this inner being has been carrying that pain ever since. It has remained the same age as you were when the trauma happened, so it hasn't evolved. All it has been doing is holding on to the pain for you and waiting for you to come and release it. So all this time, for example, an inner being that is carrying anger, when you were triggered, the inner being surfaced. So for example, someone triggers you, that the past trauma comes to the surface, which is the inner being comes to the surface. It kind of melts with you. It wants to show how angry it is, and you push it down because we're not allowed to be angry, of course. Or if you're sad, you don't want to be sad, you push your sadness down. So every time this inner being came to the surface, you have pushed it down. So the inner being is used to you always suppressing it, pushing it away, doesn't want to see it. So we can't really expect the inner beings to be, yay, you're there, I want to work with you. No, they don't trust you. They think, is she gonna push me away again? Why is she approaching me now? So a very important second step is gain the trust of the inner being. And you do this firstly by explaining who you are. Because the world that the inner beings live in, it's very chaotic. They are focused on the trauma that they carry. You can kind of compare this to dreams, or not even compare, because dreams are a view of the inner beings, but that's for later. So in dreams, you don't really know what's going on. You don't really know who you are. You don't really know your past. You're just absorbed in the feeling that you have, in the anger or in the sadness or the fear. You're in a very chaotic world. And this is how the inner beings live. So they don't have a clue of what is going on. And you start by explaining, I am, for example, I am Anne. Once we were one being, you and I, but then we experienced something very traumatic and we split. And ever since then, you have been carrying this trauma for me, this pain for me. But now I have grown up. I am over 40. It's very important that you mention your age, because they might still think that you are very young. I'm over 40, I have a house now, I have a very stable life, I have a husband, I have a daughter. So you explain everything to make them feel like you are now an adult, you are now the one that can carry the trauma. They no longer have to hold on to it for you. You are strong, you are the savior. So they no longer have to save you, you can save them. This is gaining their trust in your strength. So you do this by explaining who you are. And then you move on to explaining who they are, because I said it's all chaotic, just like in a dream, no clue what's going on. So you explain to them, as I said, we were once one, now you have split up, or you have split off, and You have been tasked really to carry this trauma for me, this pain for me, this sadness, this anger, and you've been doing that ever since. And I am so grateful, very important to mention that, so grateful for what you have done, because this is really, really a hard task, but you don't have to do it anymore. Time has now come. I am now strong enough to release you from this task. Your task is over. This is actually already a third step. So you say who you are, what they are, that they are inner beings. And then the third step is saying the task is completed and I have come to release you from the pain. And that is really touching a sensitive nerve for the inner beings, because that is what they want. That is what they desire. They want to be set free. They want to be set free from this pain. They want to be able to do what they want in life, because they have a life inside of you. And right now, it's not a very good life. It's not fun. They cannot do what they want. So if you say, I can release you, I can set you free, it'll be for them like, oh, yes, this is what I want. So we have identified the inner being, we have gained their trust. Moving on to the third step, help them release their trauma. And this depends on how strong their trust in you is. So, because basically, when you help them release their trauma, all you do is say what you have been holding on to all this time, the pain, the anger, whatever it is, set it free, let it go. This is the core of it. This is the essence. They can just open up and let go. And if they really trust you, or the more they trust you, the easier this will be for them. If they still have some difficulties to trust, they will not be able to let go. And this is okay. So you have to remember they have been alone for a long time, they've been pushed down for a long time, so that they don't trust you in an instant is really fine. If they say no, or if you feel like they're not releasing anything, perfectly okay. You don't push them, you don't pressure them, you just say, I'm just happy to get to know you. That's all that's needed for now. We'll try again tomorrow, or the next day, or the next day. There is no time pressure. You've been holding on to this for years, so a few days really doesn't matter. Just relax into it. And this is important because, when people pressure you into doing things, suddenly you cramp up, you close, so you cannot open, you cannot release when you're pressured. So really, yeah, don't push them. Don't push them. But on the other hand, there are things you can do to help them release the trauma. So you say the thing you've been holding on to, let it go. But you can help them by using visualizations. So this is really following your intuition, your imagination. Follow what you think is right. And it doesn't matter that you make mistakes. Really, you cannot do anything wrong. You cannot make it worse. You can only make it better. So, for example, one thing that you might say is, let the darkness pour out of your heart, and you might see it in your imagination or in your visions really pour out of there. Or you can say, let the darkness wash off of you, or give the anger, make a packet of the anger and give it to me. So, or give it to the sea or the sky or the earth, let it fall out of your feet and give it to the earth. So, really follow what comes, follow your inner knowing, your intuition. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. This is a learning process. The more you try, the easier it will get. And if it works, if the inner being is able to release the trauma, you will see a change in them. And this can be a simple change of, first the child was very closed and very scared, and now you see it smiling, you see it happy, it wants to go play. That is obvious. It feels better now the trauma is released. Or maybe it goes to sleep, it wants to rest. Also a very good sign, because a lot of these inner beings are super tired, and once they have released, finally they can go to sleep. So playing is good, resting is good. You might also see other changes. For example, if you're working with a demon, they might transform into an angel, which is a very obvious sign that they have released their trauma. Or you might see them throwing up something, and then the thing that they threw up actually becomes an angel. Many, many visuals are possible. So if you see a change, this is always a good sign that something is shifting. Maybe they haven't released all of it yet, but that doesn't really matter. A shift is always good, and the rest will come. So important in this step of helping them release the trauma, ask that they open up, that they release. Don't push them, but you can guide them a bit. You can, if you feel like, for some reason I feel like this child is connected to the sea, then you visualize the sea and you ask it to give it the trauma to the sea, for example. And voila, the inner being is now free. It probably won't merge with you right away. This can happen, but it doesn't have to happen. Because what the inner being is, it's actually a part of your soul that got split off. And you might think, okay, I want to merge my soul, I want to make it whole again. But this is actually not really needed. It's okay that there are still inner beings living inside of you. As long as their trauma is released, they can do really useful things in there. For example, they can help you heal the other inner beings. So there's really, again, no need to pressure them into merging. They can do this if they want to, but not necessary. What is important is that you tell them to follow their hearts, because they are now free. They can finally, for the first time in their life, do what they want. They can rest, they can play, they can whatever. Say, follow your heart, do what you really want to do, because you are now free. What a great message. So this was a very short introduction to what I call the inner beings method, a way of releasing trauma very fast, very efficiently. There is much more to be said about it, because now we talked about working with one inner being, but as I said, you have many. And there are also ways to work with a group of them at the same time, to teach them how to heal each other, to create healing spaces inside of you where they can go themselves to be healed. There's really, the possibilities are endless, and it's pretty cool once you start working with them this way. And when you start working with your inner beings, you will feel changes in yourself very fast. For example, I had this anger towards my mother, and I had worked with it so much rationally. I knew she has her own trauma. That's why she made what I think of as mistakes. But I really, rationally, I could totally forgive her. But still, every time I saw her, my walls of defense went up. I was angry. I could not get rid of this anger. And then I worked with my inner beings, I healed them in groups at the same time, and suddenly I noticed the anger towards my mother is gone. And I hadn't even worked on that topic. So somehow some of the inner beings that I was working with carried the anger and had released it without me even noticing. And it was like magic. It was just gone. It is so super cool. So stay tuned to this channel, hit that subscribe button, because I am going to upload many more videos explaining you what the inner beings method is, how you can work with the inner beings in groups, how you can heal them in bulk, all the good stuff. But for now, start working with one of your inner beings, try to heal them, try to get them to release the trauma, and don't be too disappointed if it doesn't work right away. Remember that it can take some time to gain their trust, it can take a few tries, and this is perfectly okay. The more you do it, the easier it will be. The first inner beings are really the hardest. I think the first ones took me weeks even before they released something, which is quite long. Normally it goes faster. But so the first ones took me weeks, and now that I've been doing the process for a few months, I can heal 100 of them at a time. So really, it is so easy now. Let me know in the comments how this works out for you, if you are able to connect to an inner being, if you are able to gain their trust, if they can release some trauma. I'm really curious to hear from you. I really want to know how the process goes. And yes, as I said, stay tuned to the channel because much more is coming, and then I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.